a lot of people don't understand, guys, that humans adopt things the same way over and over and over again. They don't adopt one thing this way and another thing that way. It's the same adoption curve for everything that has ever come into the human domain. Humans adopt it the same way, whether we're talking about electricity, whether we're talking about fire, whether we're talking about the use of the number zero, whether we're talking about the use of the wheel, whether we're talking about electricity, whether we're talking about cars, televisions, radio, the internet, Bitcoin. It's adopted the same way. Humans can only adopt one way. Now, this Gartner hype cycle is often part of the way humans adopt things, right? And the way it goes is like this. Once there is excitement about something, like the internet, when it finally started to catch, there was this excitement that creates this hyperbolic move to the upside. We experienced this with the internet, which helped to create the .com bubble, right? We overhype it initially, creating this massive bubble. Then that bubble sort of bursts, and then what happens is that most people stop being hyped about it. All right. And then it starts to regain interest, power, adoption, but at a more sustainable pace. And this is the one that goes on forever. Forever, guys. Now, a lot of people say, well, Oliver, what do you mean adopted forever? Well, think of it this way. Airplane travel, commercial airplane travel has been with us since what, 1905? It's well over 100 years, well over 120 years, well over 125 years, something like that, right? And yet, only 1 in every 4 human beings have ever been on a plane. It's a 125-year industry, and it's still being adopted by human beings. It still has massive growth ahead of it. Commercial air flight, commercial air travel. Only 1 in every 4 human beings have ever been on a plane. Its future is incredibly bright. It's only 1/4 of the way there. Commercial air flight. How many people? Are cars still being adopted? Of course. Fire is still being adopted. And that's 4 million years old. Do you know how many people don't have access to electricity today? Electricity is how old? It's still being adopted. How many people don't have a computer? How many people don't have an iPad? How many people don't have access to the internet? Guys, these things get adopted forever. And remember, there's 200,000 new adopters born every single day. Bitcoin's going to be adopted forever. It will go up forever. And a lot of people say, well, Oliver, but it's hard for them to wrap their minds around it. When I say, well, look, silver's 9,000 years old, right? It's been used by humans for 9,000 years old. Is it still around? Yes. Gold, 6,000 years old. The freaking bond market, guys, the bond market is what? 300, 400 years old? The equity market, the stock market that gets so much focus and attention today, it's almost what, 200 years old? Apple's near 50 years old. Microsoft, 48 years old. Google Amazon's what, 25, 26 years, 27 years old. Google's 25 years old, something like that. Bitcoin's a baby. But it's going to last forever because out of all the things that I mentioned, all the things, they can be touched, manipulated, controlled, confiscated, stolen, influenced by human beings. Out of all the things I mentioned, they have that one weakness. Bitcoin is outside of the realm of all human influence. We can have access to it, but can't have influence over it. We can have access to it, but no human being can ever steal it from you or take it from you or influence it negatively in any way. It's very, very powerful. The world is going to want that over the things that can be stolen, taken, influenced, manipulated, and controlled. They're going to want that in increasing numbers, and we're going to be there waiting. This is where we are. Oh, well, Oliver, diminishing returns. It's diminishing returns from here. How is that? Diminishing returns from here? No, dude, you get diminishing returns on the right side of that, not there. You don't get diminishing returns. We are early in this thing. Now, this is very important to take a look at. I've shown this many times, but I want you to look at this. Is almost every single thing that humans have adopted over the last 100+ years, right? Since 1900. So you see, the telephone, the television, you see everything there. Electricity, air travel, PCs, credit cards, radio, whatever. But there's something interesting I want to point out to you. Look at how the Gartner curve, right? Remember I showed you that? Is that what it's called? Remember the Gartner hype cycle? You see that dip in the middle? I want you to look at that dip in the middle. All right? That's the Gartner hype cycle, right? It causes this overzealous interest initially. Once the match gets lit, all right, boom, everybody overdoes it, causing a collapse in the middle. And then we go on to the true sustainable adoption period. That's the Gartner hype cycle. Now let's go to look at all the things that have been adopted. Do you see that Gartner hype cycle there? Do you see how in the beginning things were adopted, initially ran, and then had this middle part that dropped off a little bit? So you see telephones started in 1900, but dropped off around in the 1920s to 1930s. It didn't come all the way to the bottom, but it still dropped off for a decade. Some of these things dropped off for 2 decades, right? But I want you to now go to the far right, and I want you to see something really interesting, the way humans adopt now. There is no frickin' Gartner curve hype cycle anymore. It's straight frickin' up. Boom! Maybe a little taper, but it's not that. We don't have that anymore. Do you understand? You just get this little taper, and then it goes into this ever so slight S. Do you understand? It's not straight up, but it's ever so slight S. Before, we used to curve back down like that, right? But now it's this ever slight, I don't know if I'm doing it the right way for you, but this ever so slight, and then it curves back up. It's just a little wrinkle now. This little wrinkle, people, this is what the bozos call, oh, it's diminishing returns. No, dude, that's just the little Gartner wrinkle. And this thing is about to come out of that Gartner wrinkle in an explosive way. The same way when it was deep, you came out bullishly off the bottom of the Gartner drop, right? But we don't have the Gartner drop like that anymore. It's evident. Look at all your modern adopted things. They have a little taper, and people start doubting at that little taper. Well, maybe it's over. Maybe maybe it's all downhill from here. Maybe it's diminishing returns. Bozos. Bozos. They don't know how human beings adopt. And you can't have diminishing returns at half of 1% adoption, people. I believe that not only is Bitcoin not experiencing diminishing returns, that I believe it's going to go into an exponential, explosive second phase that will make the first one look like child's play. And I have history backing me up here, guys. Why? Because it's never the first period that's the most explosive. Never. Look at Apple. Was Apple's first 15 years the most explosive? No, it was the later. It's never the first that's the most explosive. Never. Not with something that's going to last. It's never the first leg, never the first adoption wave. So that first adoption wave does taper off. And then when you get that second one, OMG. Whoo! I just get chills just even thinking about it. I believe that the second leg is the big one. I believe the second phase for Bitcoin is the big one. I believe that the best years are in front of Bitcoin, not in back of it. As miraculous as those gains were, as powerful as its up move was, I believe we ain't seen nothing yet. And this halving, the one that's going to happen in a few days, is the one that's going to kick off the most explosive period Bitcoin's ever had. That's my theory, guys. I don't want you to miss this. And I'm betting big on it. I believe that we're going to come out of that first tapering off period and go into that climactic upper part of its first S, as Bitcoin will S many times over the next several hundred years.